When I arrived at my son's wedding, the first thing I noticed was the puzzled expression on the faces of the staff. I gave them my name expecting to be shown inside, but instead they whispered among themselves, checked their list again and finally told me I wasn't on it. My chest tightened. Surely there had been a mistake. I searched for my son hoping he would clear things up. When I finally found him among the guests and softly asked, he looked at me with open disdain. His words struck me like a blade. "Did you really think you'd be invited?" I didn't argue. I smiled gently, nodded, and told him I understood. Then I turned and walked away, holding back the storm inside me. But as the ceremony began, whispers spread through the crowd. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. My name lit up on the screen over and over, though I never once called. Fate had a way of making itself known. My name is Helena. I am 71 years old. And that day I realized with unbearable clarity that I had raised a man without gratitude, without heart, a stranger I could barely recognize as the boy I once carried in my arms. Decades earlier I had found Adrian in an orphanage, abandoned and crying. He was 3 years old, small and fragile, but when he reached out and clung to me, I knew my life would never be the same. I gave him my last name, my home, my everything. I worked long nights, double shifts to give him the best of everything. Clothes, books, education. I never remarried, never chased dreams of my own. I poured all of myself into him. The day he graduated as an engineer, I wept with pride, believing that every sacrifice had been worth it. But I could never have predicted that the very son I loved so fiercely would one day shut me out like I was nothing. It began when he met Eliza. At first I welcomed her with open arms. But soon I noticed the way she looked at me, like I was an inconvenience. "Your mother is too attached," I overheard her telling him. "A woman her age should have her own life, not always hanging around." And Adrian, my Adrian, listened quietly, nodding as if every word she spoke was truth. Little by little he drifted away. The phone calls grew shorter, the visits less frequent, the excuses endless. And the worst part wasn't Eliza's barbed remarks. It was his silence. When she once sneered at the dinner I had cooked, calling it inedible, I looked to him for defense. He didn't even raise his head. When she mocked the blouse I wore, smirking that it looked too young for me, he chuckled along. The deepest cut came the night they announced their engagement. They invited Eliza's family, her siblings, her parents, her friends. I was told nothing. I walked into their home expecting a quiet dinner, only to find champagne glasses clinking and everyone shouting congratulations, as she flaunted a glittering ring. I forced a smile, swallowed my pain, and told them I was happy. But inside I felt something collapse. That night, Adrian spoke to me in a voice that no longer belonged to my son. "Eliza and I want something small," he said coldly. "Just immediate family." I nodded, foolishly believing that I was part of that circle. As the wedding drew closer, I tried to ask about the plans, but Eliza's answers were vague. "We'll let you know," she'd say dismissively. The truth revealed itself only 3 days before the ceremony. When I asked Adrian what time I should arrive, he hesitated. Then, in a voice flat and unfeeling, he said, "We've decided it'll only be for the closest family." My breath caught. "But Adrian," I whispered, my voice trembling, "I'm your mother." "I know," he said without hesitation. "But Eliza feels you don't fit the image we want." Those words carved themselves into me. I didn't fit their image. After all the years, after every sacrifice, after giving him every ounce of love I had, he cast me aside like a shadow he was ashamed of. The woman who had sacrificed everything for him, who had worked herself into exhaustion to give him a decent life, who had given up love and all of her own dreams, did not fit their image. So I decided to go. I put on the best dress I owned, the one I had bought years ago, imagining I'd wear it on his wedding day. I styled my hair carefully, called a taxi, and rode to the venue with hope trembling in my chest. A part of me believed that if Adrian saw me there, he might remember the years I had given him, the nights I stayed awake when he was sick, the countless sacrifices I made so he could have everything. I was wrong. When I arrived and gave my name at the reception, the staff searched the guest list again and again, before looking at me with an uneasy smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't here." "There must be a mistake," I insisted. "I'm Adrian's mother." It was then I saw him approaching, handsome in his tuxedo, his familiar smile fixed on his face. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, his tone sharp with irritation rather than surprise. "Adrian," I said softly, "I came to your wedding. My name isn't on the list, but surely that's an error." He looked at me with a coldness I had never seen in him before. "It's not a mistake, Mom. I told you, this is for close family only." "But I am your family," I pleaded. "I am your mother." He sighed and rolled his eyes as though I were some nuisance he had long grown tired of. "Did you really think you'd be invited after everything you've done?" His words crushed me. "Everything I've done? Adrian, I gave you everything." "Exactly," he said bitterly. "Always giving. Always smothering. Always meddling in my life. Eliza was right, you never knew your place." At that moment, Eliza appeared, radiant in her gown. When she noticed me standing there, her smile faltered. "What is she doing here?" she asked as though I couldn't hear her. "She's just leaving," Adrian replied coolly without even looking at me. "Right, Mom?" I could have broken down. I could have begged him to reconsider. I could have created a scene. Tad, I smiled. A calm, steady smile that made them both uneasy. "I understand perfectly," I told them. "Have a beautiful wedding." Then I turned and walked away. As I stepped outside, I took out my phone and dialed a number. "Samuel," I said when he answered, "I think it's time we move forward with what we discussed." He hesitated. "Are you certain, Helena? Once we begin, there's no turning back." "I've never been more certain," I replied, climbing into a taxi. "Adrian just showed me exactly what I mean to him. It's time for him to see what he's really about to lose." The car pulled away from the venue and my phone buzzed with messages. Not from Adrian. From Eliza. Her words were dripping with venom. "How dare you show up uninvited? You have no dignity. Adrian is upset with you. I hope you're happy ruining our special day. Ruining their day." As though my 5-minute presence had destroyed anything. Eliza had no idea what it meant to ruin something, but she was about to learn. When I got home for the first time in years, I felt a deep, unexpected calm. I took off the dress I had bought for a celebration I was never meant to be part of, hung it carefully, and stared at myself in the mirror. For so long I had lived on tiptoe. Careful not to intrude, careful not to offend, careful always to be the perfect mother, the quiet shadow. That night I finally made the most important decision of my life. I was retiring, not from work but from the role of being taken for granted. I was retiring from being a mother. Adrian never knew the truth about my financial life. When I adopted him, I was just a young woman working as a secretary, living in a tiny apartment, barely getting by. He grew up watching me work long hours, taking on extra shifts, stretching every coin. He thought our survival depended entirely on my struggle, and I let him believe that. What he never knew was that my father, who had moved to Europe in the 1950s, had built a fortune through an import-export business. Over the years he invested wisely: stocks, real estate, and private ventures that flourished. When he passed away a decade ago, he left everything to me. Properties scattered across Switzerland, accounts with more zeros than Adrian could ever imagine, shares in companies that seemed untouchable. But I chose to keep living as if nothing had changed. I stayed in my modest home, kept working, and never told Adrian about the inheritance. I wanted him to love me for me, not for the wealth behind me. That choice was the greatest mistake of my life. On the very night Adrian married Eliza, while their reception sparkled with laughter and champagne, I sat at my computer setting plans into motion. I made calls, shifted funds, and drafted instructions with Samuel, my lawyer of more than 20 years. The next morning, while they were still basking in the glow of their hurried honeymoon, the ground beneath them began to shift. It started quietly. 3 days after the wedding, Adrian called. Not to apologize, not to ask how I was feeling. "Mom, I need you to water the plants and collect the mail while Eliza and I are in Cancun," he said casually, as though nothing had happened. "Oh, and Eliza wants you to tidy the place a bit. We'll have guests when we return." "I can't," I replied simply. "What do you mean you can't?" he asked, surprised. "I'm busy," I told him. "Find someone else." Then I hung up. An hour later the phone rang again, this time Eliza's voice shrieking on the other end. "What is wrong with you, Helena? Are you out of your mind? It's the least you could do after the stunt you pulled at our wedding." "I didn't cause a scene," I said calmly. "I went to congratulate my son." "Your son doesn't want you around," she snapped. "Get it through your head. You're nothing but a burden to him." Burden. After all I had done, all the years I had given, that was what I had become. "You're right, Eliza," I told her, my voice steady. "I am a burden. That's why I've decided to free him from me forever." Her tone changed instantly. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean," I said, "I'm retiring. Adrian no longer has a mother." Then I ended the call and switched off my phone. The next day I hired movers. I packed only the things I truly wanted and donated the rest. I sold my little house, the place where I had raised Adrian, and checked into a luxury hotel downtown. Not because I couldn't buy a mansion of my own, but because I wanted time to think. Time to decide exactly how I would live the rest of my life. Samuel came to see me that first week. "Helena, are you absolutely sure about this?" he asked, scanning the stack of documents I'd handed him. "I've been sure since the moment Adrian looked at me with contempt at that wedding," I replied. "He thinks I'm a weak, poor old woman who needs him. It's time he learns the truth." The papers Samuel held weren't just financial statements or property deeds. They revealed something Adrian never suspected. The house he lived in wasn't his at all. The mortgage he thought he was paying off had been quietly sustained by me. I had made the down payment, signed the documents, and kept the payments flowing every month. He had been living under the roof I provided without even realizing it. And that was only the beginning. The company where Adrian worked as an engineer also carried a secret. Its owner, Mr. Harrington, wasn't just a respected businessman. He had been one of my father's closest associates in Europe. When Adrian graduated, I had gone to Mr. Harrington and asked him to give my son a chance. That single request secured him a job at the company, and for years Harrington kept me updated on his progress. The truth was painful. Adrian was never the star employee he pretended to be. He was average at best, careless at worst, And the only reason he hadn't been dismissed long ago was because of my influence. Eliza, radiant in her illusions, had no idea who she had really married. She thought her husband was a promising, self-made engineer. She bragged about his career, about how fortunate she was to have him. But the man she clung to was nothing more than the adopted son of a woman who could, without hesitation, buy and sell her entire family twice over. While Adrian and Eliza were sipping cocktails on their honeymoon, living off the wedding gifts from her relatives, I was at the hotel spa, wrapped in the kind of luxury I hadn't tasted in decades. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to rest, to feel hands massaging away decades of stress. I had lived so long for Adrian, working for him, worrying for him, sacrificing for him, that I had forgotten how to live for myself. Somewhere between the quiet music and the lavender scent, my next decision took shape. I wasn't only retiring from being a mother. I was going to ensure that Adrian and Eliza truly understood what they had thrown away. When they returned from their honeymoon, the unraveling began. It started with the electricity. Their lights went out and Adrian called me in a rage. "Mom, why didn't you pay the bill for the house?" "Because it isn't my house," I answered evenly. "And because I'm no longer your mother." "What are you talking about? Of course you're my mom." "No," I said firmly. "Mothers are invited to their sons' weddings. I wasn't invited. That role no longer belongs to me." There was a pause. "Don't be ridiculous, Mom. It was just a wedding." "Exactly," I replied. "The most important day of your life, and you chose to erase me from it. Now you live with the consequences." "You've always paid my utilities," he shouted. "It's your obligation." I laughed bitterly. Obligation? For 28 years I carried obligations that weren't mine. That ends now. And before he could say more, I hung up and dialed Mr. Harrington. "Good morning, Mr. Harrington," I said calmly. "It's Helena. I think it's time we spoke about Adrian." "Ah, Helena." His sigh carried disappointment. "I assumed this call would come sooner or later. I heard about the wedding. That boy has no idea what you've done for him." "That's exactly why I'm calling," I replied. "It's time he learns what life is like without my shadow behind him. No more favors. Let him stand on his own merit." There was a silence on the line before Harrington said, "If I pull back my protection, Adrian will struggle. His work is below standard, his attendance is poor, and clients have complained. Without my shield, the company will treat him as any other employee, and I don't expect it to end well." "Then let the company handle him accordingly," I said. He chose this path. While Adrian's career foundation began to shake, Eliza discovered another unpleasant surprise. The credit card she had used freely for shopping sprees and beauty treatments was suddenly declined at her favorite boutique. The saleswoman told her the account had been frozen for non-payment. What she didn't know was that the card had been mine all along, created and covered quietly so she could indulge herself. That evening, Eliza's shriek echoed through their apartment. "Adrian, your mother canceled my card. Call her right now and fix this." Adrian called me, voice brimming with anger. "Mom, how can you be so cruel? Eliza needs that card." "She can apply for her own card," I said calmly. "Or you can get one for her, using your credit." "You know I don't have credit," he snapped. "You've always handled that." "Exactly," I replied. "You've never paid for anything yourself. That's why you have nothing of your own." "You're just a bitter old woman," he yelled. But I didn't raise my voice. I simply smiled to myself because for the first time he was beginning to see the edges of a life without me. That's why no one really cares about you. Adrian's words cut deep, sharper than he realized. For a brief moment, Helena felt the familiar sting of guilt she had carried for years. But this time she refused to let it silence her. Adrian, she said firmly, her voice steady. For 28 years I swallowed every insult, worked myself half to death and gave up my own dreams so you could live yours. I let you believe the world revolved around you. But when the most important day of your life came, you erased me as if I never mattered. Now you're going to learn what it means to stand without me. She hung up the phone and turned it off. No more late-night calls to rescue him. No more covering his bills. No more being invisible. The next morning, Helena arrived at Adrian's office. She stepped out of a sleek town car in a tailored navy suit, the kind that made people look twice. Her hair was styled neatly, her presence commanding. Inside, heads turned as she walked past cubicles with quiet confidence. Adrian emerged from his desk, startled. "Mom? What are you doing here?" "I came to speak with you," Helena said. "Privately." They entered the conference room and she closed the door behind them. "I need you to hear something clearly," she began. "For years your boss, Mr. Whitman, has tolerated your behavior because of me. But that grace has ended." Adrian's face shifted uneasily. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the missed deadlines, the careless mistakes, the complaints from clients. You've been carried, not by your talent but by my influence. And it stops now." Adrian laughed nervously. "That's not true, is it?" Helena pulled out her phone and dialed. "Mr. Whitman, would you join us in the conference room, please?" Minutes later, the door opened. Mr. Whitman walked in holding a folder thick with reports. He nodded politely to Helena, then turned his attention to Adrian. "Adrian," he said evenly, "your mother asked me to bring this to you." He laid the folder on the table and flipped it open. "Your attendance record. 42 late arrivals in the last 2 years. Repeated project errors. And 3 separate clients have demanded that you not be assigned to their accounts again." Adrian's mouth went dry. "But no one ever told me." "Because your mother asked me not to," Mr. Whitman interrupted. "She begged me to be patient, promised to cover losses, even made quiet payments when your mistakes cost us clients. She's shielded you more than you know." Adrian's face drained of color. "That's not possible." Helena leaned forward, her voice calm but resolute. "It's more than possible. It's the truth. I wanted to believe that if I gave you everything, one day you'd grow into the man I knew you could be. But instead, you've grown into someone who thinks love is a debt I'll never stop paying. Someone who thinks his mother doesn't deserve respect." Mr. Whitman closed the folder. "As a favor to Helena, I'll give you 2 weeks to find another position. After that, your employment here will end." He stood and left, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Adrian turned to her, panic in his eyes. "Mom, please. Eliza will leave me if I lose this job. You can't do this. You should have thought about that before you treated me like I was nothing," Helena replied, rising to her feet. He grabbed her arm. "Wait. You can't walk away. I'm your son." Helena pulled free. Her voice trembled, but not with weakness, with certainty. "My son would have defended me when his fiancée mocked me. My son would have wanted me at his wedding. My son would have honored me, not used me. You're not that man, Adrian. You are someone I no longer recognize. Someone living in a house I bought, holding a job I secured, married to a woman who despises me as much as you do." She straightened her jacket and left the room, not looking back. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, Helena felt lighter, finally free from the chains of obligation. I stepped out of the office, and for the first time in decades, I felt unburdened, free in a way I hadn't known I could be. That evening, Adrian came home completely undone. Eliza was there, glass of wine in hand, expecting her usual cheerful husband to regale her with tales of his day. But when she saw the look on his face, she froze. "What's wrong?" she asked, concern creeping into her voice. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," Adrian muttered, sinking onto the couch. "I saw my mother become my worst nightmare." He told her everything. The reports from his supervisors, the threat of losing his job, the revelation that Helena had been quietly covering for his mistakes for years. Eliza's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're telling me your mother has been controlling your career this whole time?" "It wasn't control," Adrian murmured. "It was protection." "Protection? That's manipulation," Eliza snapped. "She's a psychopath. First she ruins our wedding, and now she's sabotaging your career." But for the first time, Adrian hesitated. Something in him shifted. For his entire life, Helena had been the unseen force that kept everything together. Paying bills, opening doors, solving problems he didn't even know existed. And he had treated her like an intruder on his wedding day. "Maybe we should apologize," Adrian said slowly. "Apologize?" Eliza scoffed. "Adrian, she's blackmailing you. She's trying to make you feel guilty." "It's not blackmail," he said quietly. "It's consequences. I told her she didn't fit our image, and now she's showing me that I don't fit in hers." Eliza could hardly process it. "You're defending her? After everything she did today?" "Everything she did?" Adrian's eyes were tired but steady. "She opened my eyes. For years I believed I had earned everything on my own. Thought I was successful. But it wasn't me, it was her. She made all of it possible." That night I sat in my hotel suite, enjoying room service and the rare luxury of watching the news. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon. Calls and messages from Adrian and Eliza, probably frantic, probably pleading, but I kept it silent. I had learned something vital. When someone shows you who they really are, you must believe them. The next morning, Samuel arrived with more documents. "Helena, I have the transfers ready. Are you sure you want to do this?" I held the papers in my hands. The deeds to Adrian's house, the withdrawal of my co-signature from his loans, the cancellation of automatic payments I had been covering for years. "Completely sure," I said. "He wants independence. He's going to get it." I signed the documents, and Samuel left to execute the transfers. Within 24 hours, Adrian would discover the truth. The house he lived in was no longer his credit cards had been cancelled, and he would now have to pay rent he couldn't afford on a job he was about to lose. But my plan didn't stop there. It wasn't enough for Adrian to learn a lesson. I also wanted Eliza to see who she had really crossed. That woman had spent months belittling me, treating me like an annoying, worthless old woman. It was time she understood exactly who she had underestimated. It was time for Eliza to understand my real worth. That afternoon, I dressed in a sharp, tailored suit and took a taxi to the boutique where she worked. It was one of the city's most exclusive stores, the kind where she felt important, helping wealthy clients feel glamorous. What she didn't know was that I was richer than most of the women who shopped there. I entered the store casually, browsing the racks as if I belonged. Eliza was assisting a customer when she spotted me. Her face froze. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice etched with hostility. "I'm shopping," I said calmly. "Isn't that your job?" The other client glanced between us, puzzled. "Do you know this woman?" she asked. "She's my mother-in-law," Eliza spat, her words dripping with contempt. "One who doesn't know her place." I smiled lightly. "Then I do know my place. My place is that of a woman with money who intends to spend it. Will you help me, or should I ask for your manager?" Eliza's face flushed with anger, but she held back. There were other customers watching. "What do you want?" she muttered. "That dress in the window," I said, pointing to the most expensive gown in the boutique. The price tag read $6,000. Eliza's eyes widened. $6,000? Are you serious?" "Yes, $6,000. Do you think I can't afford it?" She stomped off to retrieve the dress, muttering insults under her breath. When she returned, she held it out with an annoyed glare. "Here it is," she said. "But I doubt you can pay for it." I pulled out my platinum card and handed it to her. "Charge it," I said. "And while you're at it, I want you to understand something." Eliza swiped the card at the register. The transaction went through instantly, and the system revealed a credit limit that left her speechless. "How?" she stammered. I smiled. "Very easily, Eliza. I've never been poor." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Her eyes widened as she saw the balance. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing at the numbers. "That's just one account. I own properties in Geneva, hold stocks in multiple companies, and have more money than you could earn in a lifetime at this store." Eliza handed back the card with trembling hands. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I wanted Adrian to value me for who I am, not for what I have," I said. "But you both showed me what I'm worth to you. Nothing. So now I'm showing you what you're about to lose." I picked up my bag with the dress and headed toward the door. Before leaving, I looked back at her. "Oh, and one more thing. Adrian will lose his job next week, and the house you live in is no longer yours. I hope you have some savings because you're going to need them." I walked out, leaving Eliza frozen behind the counter. That evening she arrived home, trembling with rage and confusion. Adrian was in the living room, nursing a beer and trying to forget the disaster of his day. "Your mother was at my work today," Eliza shouted from the doorway. Adrian turned off the TV and frowned. "What? Why?" "To humiliate me," she replied, throwing her purse to the floor. "She bought a $6,000 dress just to show me she has money." Adrian blinked, incredulous. $6,000? Mom's a retired secretary. She can't spend $6,000 on a dress." "That's what we thought," Eliza snapped, her voice shaking. "But she showed me her bank account, Adrian. He has millions. Millions." Adrian went quiet, trying to process what he had just learned. "That's impossible," he murmured. "I always thought Mom was just middle class." Eliza started pacing nervously. "For years she made you believe she was struggling just to manipulate you. She's a sociopath." But Adrian's mind was recalling moments he had never questioned before. His mother had always had exactly what was needed for emergencies. When he had appendicitis in college, she appeared with the money for the private surgery. When he bought his first car, she quietly covered the down payment. When he needed a suit for graduation, she gifted it without hesitation. "Eliza," he said slowly, "I don't think Mom ever lied about her finances. We just never asked." Eliza blinked. "We never asked? What are you talking about?" I lived with her my whole life, Adrian said. And I never really wanted to know about her past, her family, or her money. I just assumed she existed to take care of me. The realization hit them both like a splash of cold water. Eliza understood she had married a man who barely knew his own mother, and Adrian realized he had treated a woman who had sacrificed so much for him with contempt and ingratitude. The next day, Adrian decided he had to see Helena. He arrived at the hotel and approached the concierge. "I'm looking for Helena," he said. The concierge gave him a measuring look. "Are you a relative of hers?" "I'm her son," Adrian replied. "Ah," the concierge said with a faintly mocking smile. "The son who didn't invite her to his wedding." The lady gave very specific instructions. She does not want to see family. "I can deliver a message for you if you like." Adrian quickly scribbled an apology and begged for a chance to speak. The concierge disappeared into the elevator and returned 5 minutes later, handing him the note. "She says, you already had your chance at the wedding and you wasted it. There will be no second chance," he read. Adrian left the hotel feeling emptier than ever. Meanwhile, I sat in my suite speaking with Mr. Harrison. "How is Adrian doing at work?" I asked. "Helena," he sighed. "The boy is a wreck. He's late constantly, making mistakes, and yesterday a client complained because he broke down crying during a presentation." "Crying?" I asked, stunned. "Yes," Mr. Harrison confirmed. They asked him about project costs and he just started sobbing, saying he didn't know anything anymore, that his whole life had been a lie. For a brief moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. Despite everything, he was still the boy I had raised, the one who ran into my arms when he was hurt. But then I remembered the look of contempt on his face when he had thrown me out of his wedding. That sting turned into steely determination. "Mr. Harrison," I said, "stick to the plan. Adrian needs to learn that actions have consequences." Later that week, Adrian and Eliza were served legal papers regarding the house. A lawyer presented documents proving that the property had been fully transferred to my name, and they had 30 days either to vacate or begin paying $3,000 a month in rent. Eliza read the papers and began to panic. This is impossible," she screamed, shaking the documents. "The house is ours," Eliza shouted, waving the deed. "Apparently not," Adrian said in a flat voice. "Apparently my mother has been paying for this house for years and I never knew." Eliza's face twisted in fury. "You're useless. How could you not know your own mother owned this house? How could you marry a failure?" Her screams grew louder and louder until the neighbors called the police about a domestic disturbance. When the officers arrived, they found Eliza smashing plates and furniture while Adrian curled up in a corner, trembling and crying. "Ma'am," one of the officers said firmly, "you need to calm down or we will have to take action for disturbing the peace." "You can't arrest me," Eliza yelled. "This is my house." The officer glanced at the documents in his hand. "According to these papers, this property belongs to a woman named Helena. Are you Helena?" "I'm her daughter-in-law," Eliza stammered. "Then this is not your house," the officer said. "I suggest you resolve this calmly or we will have to intervene." After the police left, Adrian and Eliza sat among the wreckage, surrounded by broken plates and overturned furniture. "What are we going to do?" Eliza whispered. "I don't know," Adrian admitted. "I have no job, no house, and no savings. I always assumed my mother would handle everything for me." "I hate her," Eliza screamed, tears streaming down her face. "She ruined our lives." No, Adrian said quietly, his voice breaking. We ruined our lives when we decided she didn't deserve our respect. It was the first time he had admitted their mistake, but Eliza was far from accepting responsibility. In her mind, Helena was the villain who had destroyed their perfect life. What she didn't realize was that the life she had believed perfect had been built entirely on Helena's quiet sacrifices. That night, fueled by anger and humiliation, Eliza made a decision that would spiral beyond her control. She opened her social media and began drafting a post she hoped would go viral, painting Helena as the ultimate villain. My psycho mother-in-law kicked us out of our house after ruining our wedding, the post began. For years she pretended to be poor to manipulate my husband, but she's actually a millionaire. Now that we're married, she's destroying our lives out of jealousy. Adrian lost his job because of her, and now we have nowhere to live. She cannot accept that her son doesn't need her anymore. The post included photos of Eliza crying and of their trashed home after her tantrum. Within hours, it had thousands of shares and comments. People were outraged at the evil mother-in-law, who supposedly abandoned her son after the wedding. Eliza had painted herself as the innocent young bride destroyed by a jealous older woman, and the online crowd swallowed the story whole. Comments poured in. "What a terrible mother-in-law," one person wrote. "She should be ashamed," another added. Eliza read each one with growing satisfaction, feeling vindicated by the outrage of strangers. But in her rush for revenge, Eliza made one critical mistake. She had tagged Helena by full name in the post, thinking it would shame her. Instead, it only ensured that Helena would see every insult directed at her and that the world would soon hear the truth from Helena's side. What Eliza didn't realize was that by tagging my name, she had ensured that people who actually knew me would see her post. The first message came from an old colleague. "Helena, have you seen what your daughter-in-law is posting online? It's all lies." I opened social media for the first time in weeks and read her post. Every sentence twisted the truth. Every accusation inverted reality. Hundreds of comments insulted me without anyone knowing the facts. Toxic mother-in-law. Bitter woman. Psychopath. Abusive. Each word landed like a slap, but strangely they didn't hurt as much as I expected. What disturbed me more was that Eliza had accomplished exactly what she wanted, to cast me as the villain in her story. My pain, my disappointment, my choice to step back from a toxic relationship, all of it had been transformed into a narrative where she was the innocent victim and I was the cruel monster. That night, I decided it was time to set the record straight. I opened my own social media account and began typing, not with anger but with calm clarity. "My name is Helena," I began. "I am the so-called psycho mother-in-law you've been reading about. Here is the truth." I wrote about adopting Adrian, about the years I had worked tirelessly to provide him with a good life, and about all the sacrifices I had made. I explained how I had quietly covered his expenses for years. His home, his credit cards, his medical bills, even his job security. I recounted the repeated humiliations from Eliza, Adrian's growing contempt, and finally being excluded from his wedding. I clarified that I had never kicked them out of the house. I was simply charging rent for a property I had purchased and maintained. I hadn't made Adrian lose his job. I had only stopped covering for his repeated mistakes. I had never pretended to be poor to manipulate anyone. I had kept my private life private so that Adrian would value me for who I am, not for what I have. The most impactful part of my post came next. Over the past few months, I had started recording conversations with Eliza and Adrian, Not out of malice but for protection. When someone repeatedly lies about your words or actions, recordings become your only defense. I shared clips of Eliza insulting me, of Adrian saying I didn't fit their image, and the phone call where Eliza screamed that I was a burden. I posted these snippets alongside my explanation. The response was immediate. Comments began to shift. That daughter-in-law is awful. How can a son treat his mother like that? This woman is a saint for enduring so much. I wasn't done. Over the next few days, I shared receipts showing the money I had spent for Adrian, bank statements documenting years of financial support, copies of loans I had co-signed, and screenshots of messages where Eliza treated me with contempt. With each post, the narrative changed. People began sharing my story, adding comments like, "This is what happens when you don't value your mother." A powerful lesson about the consequences of our actions. Slowly, the truth was emerging, and for the first time I felt the weight of injustice lifting from my shoulders. The post that truly shifted everything was the one where I shared Adrian's adoption story. I wrote, 28 years ago, I adopted a 3-year-old boy abandoned by his biological mother. He was frightened, lonely, and in need of love. I gave him that love without condition for decades. But unconditional love does not mean tolerating disrespect. Sometimes the most valuable lesson a parent can teach is that actions have consequences. The post took off immediately. Thousands shared it, saved it, and commented. Mothers across the globe connected with the story. Adult children began reconsidering how they treated their own parents. The conversation had completely flipped. Eliza watched her narrative unravel in real time. Comments on her original post were now filled with criticism. How could you lie about a woman who sacrificed everything for her child? People wrote. Shame on you, others added. In desperation, Eliza went live to defend herself. Hi everyone, she began, her voice trembling. I know many of you have seen my mother-in-law's posts, and I want to clarify. She's lying about everything. She's manipulative and controlling. She ruined our marriage because she can't accept that Adrian doesn't need her anymore. At first, only a few dozen watched, but the audience grew quickly as the stream spread. Where's the proof? People commented. Clara's recordings sound very clear. Why don't you show evidence like she did? Eliza's confident facade began to crumble. She manipulated those recordings. She edited them to make me look bad, she shouted. I watched her flounder from my hotel suite and knew it was time to intervene. I went live and left a comment on her stream. Hello, Eliza. May I join your broadcast? The comment caused an immediate uproar. She's here. This is going to be good. Finally, we'll hear both sides, viewers wrote. Eliza turned pale. No. I'm not giving her a platform to lie about me, she stammered. But the audience demanded it. Coward. If you're telling the truth, let her speak. Reluctantly, Eliza allowed me to join the live stream. The contrast was striking. I appeared calm, composed, and elegantly dressed in my suite, while she looked anxious, disheveled, and tense in her cluttered living room. Hello, Eliza, I said smoothly. Thank you for letting me clarify the situation. Go ahead, she snapped. Lie all you want. People already know the truth about you. The truth, I replied evenly, is that you have been insulting me for months, and I have the recordings to prove it. Would you like me to play them for everyone to hear? Her face turned red. Those recordings are illegal. I smiled calmly. In this country, it is legal to record conversations when you are a participant, especially when you are being harassed or threatened. The comments were flooded with viewers urging me to play the recordings. Play them. We need to hear the truth. I complied. I played the audio where Eliza screamed at me, calling me a burden to Adrian, claiming I had no dignity, insulting me for simply attending their wedding. The recordings were clear, every word dripping with contempt, words no daughter-in-law should ever say to her husband's mother. When the audio ended, Eliza was visibly shaking, tears streaming down her face. That was out of context, she whispered. Out of context? I asked. In what context is it acceptable to tell a 71-year-old woman that she is a burden and has no dignity? You provoked us. Eliza yelled. You were always meddling in our marriage. Meddling? I said, keeping my voice steady. Can you name a single instance where I meddled? Where did I interfere without reason? She opened her mouth but could produce no answer. There wasn't one. The only times I interacted with you, I continued, was when Adrian asked me for help or when you invited me to dinner. I never showed up uninvited. I never criticized your relationship. I never gave unsolicited advice. My only crime was existing. The comments erupted in my favor. Brooke looks like a liar, someone wrote. Another commented, this woman is so dignified. How could anyone treat their mother like that? The live viewers had already passed 10,000. You blackmailed us. Eliza shouted. You took our house. You took Adrian's job to force us to apologize. I didn't take anything, I said calmly. I simply stopped paying for what was mine all along. The house. Always mine. Adrian's job? Secured through my influence. Credit cards? Paid by me. You never owned any of it. Watch. I held up documents to the camera. These are the deeds to the house. Always in my name. These are bank statements showing the mortgage I've covered for 5 years. These are receipts for every credit card I've paid for Adrian. Eliza's protests faltered. But we were family, she whispered broken. Family. I repeated. Family invites each other to weddings. Family treats one another with respect. You showed me none of that. To you I was an unpaid employee. Then I addressed Adrian directly, knowing he was watching. For 28 years I was your mother. I changed your diapers. I took you to the doctor when you were sick. I worked extra hours to pay for your education. I defended you when you got into trouble. And when the time came for you to stand up for me, you humiliated me. That choice has consequences. Eliza tried to interrupt, but I continued. You chose to see me as a threat rather than an ally. You chose to insult me instead of showing respect. You chose to lie about me on social media instead of accepting responsibility. Now you will live with the consequences of those choices. The comments erupted in support. What a strong woman. Brooke should be ashamed. Poetic justice. The live viewers climbed past 15,000. Do you know the saddest part of this, Eliza? I asked. She shook her head, trembling. That I truly wanted to love you. When Adrian told me he had a girlfriend, I was genuinely thrilled. I thought I was finally going to have a daughter. I had prepared dinners for them, bought thoughtful gifts, and tried to include Eliza in all our family traditions. But from the start she had chosen to see me as an adversary. Now she was crying openly on the screen. I didn't know, she stammered. Of course you knew, I said calmly. You knew exactly what you were doing, and now everyone else knows too. I ended the live stream, leaving Eliza alone, sobbing, while clips of our conversation quickly spread across social media. I hadn't used lies or manipulation. I had simply told the truth. Within hours, the stream went viral, shared millions of times under titles like "Mother-in-Law Exposes Lying Daughter-in-Law" and "The Most Elegant Revenge in History." Eliza was exposed as deceitful and manipulative, while I had emerged as a composed woman defending herself with facts. The consequences were swift and harsh. The boutique where Eliza worked terminated her the very next day. "We can't have employees who generate this kind of controversy," her manager explained. "Our clientele are sophisticated women who now see you as contentious." Eliza tried to explain, but the video of her insults had already circulated widely, seen by many of the store's clients. Adrian arrived at work to find a termination letter on his desk. Mr. Harrison had granted him some grace, but the public exposure made it impossible to keep him on. "After what happened last night," Mr. Harrison said gently, "several clients have called refusing to work with someone who treats his mother this way. I'm sorry, Adrian, but your employment ends today." Social media didn't stop there. Users dug into their past posts, finding inconsistencies and lies. People discovered Eliza had boasted about expensive gifts Adrian supposedly gave her, gifts they now knew I had paid for. They uncovered evidence that the couple had been living far beyond their means. The hashtag Team Helena began trending worldwide. Mothers everywhere shared their own stories of ungrateful children or disrespectful daughters-in-law, and of families where sacrifices were ignored once they were no longer convenient. My story resonated deeply, striking a chord with millions. I watched the chaos unfold from my hotel suite, a mixture of satisfaction and sadness settling over me. Justice had been done. My name was cleared. I had made my point. Yet the victory was bittersweet. My relationship with Adrian was irreparably damaged. Later that afternoon, Samuel arrived with more legal documents. "Helena," he said, "Adrian and Eliza have been trying to reach me. They want to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" I asked. "They're asking you to return the house and drop your legal claims against them for defamation. In exchange, they promise to apologize publicly and never interfere in your life again." I laughed bitterly. They want to negotiate now, after calling me a liar and a manipulative monster in front of millions? "They're desperate," Samuel said, shaking his head. Adrian and Eliza were left with nothing. No jobs, no home, no savings. Eliza's social media inbox was flooded with threats, while Adrian struggled with panic attacks. "Panic attacks?" I asked, feeling a faint pang of concern despite everything. "Yes," Samuel confirmed. "He can't even leave the house without people confronting him about how he treated you. Yesterday, an elderly woman slapped him in the supermarket, calling him a disgrace as a son." For a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of compassion. After all, Adrian had once been the boy I held when he cried, the one whose first steps and birthdays I celebrated. But the memory of his disgusted face at my wedding wiped it away. Consequences of their choices, I murmured to myself. They had chosen this path. "What should I tell them?" Samuel asked. "Tell them the house is mine and will remain mine," I said firmly. "If they want to stay, they pay the full $3,000 rent. If not, they leave. As for the defamation claims, they will continue until I receive a complete public apology and compensation for the damage they caused." Samuel left and I sat alone with my thoughts. The truth was, I didn't need the money. I had more than I could ever spend. But Adrian and Eliza had to understand that actions carry consequences, that you cannot treat someone like dirt and expect no repercussions. That night, Adrian finally managed to reach me. He had tracked down my hotel number and called repeatedly until I answered. "Mom," he said, his voice broken. "Please, we need to talk." "We already talked," I reminded him, thinking of the wedding venue. "You told me I didn't fit your image." "Mom, please," he pleaded. "I'm confused," I said sharply. "Eliza didn't force you to kick me out of my own son's wedding. That decision was yours. She didn't make you treat me with contempt for months. Those were your choices." "I didn't know you had money," he said desperately. "If I had known, I would never have treated you like that." His words felt like a knife to my chest. "Do you hear what you're saying, Adrian? You would have treated me better if you had known I had money? What about respecting me as your mother? What about valuing me for the life I sacrificed for you?" Adrian fell silent, finally grasping the weight of his admission. "I didn't mean that," he whispered. "Yes, you did," I said quietly. "And that is why our relationship is over. For you, my worth was measured by what I could give you, not who I am." "What can I do to make you forgive me?" he asked, crying. "Nothing," I replied, my voice trembling. "There's nothing you can do. Forgiveness is for those who make mistakes. You showed me your true character when you thought you were free to despise me. Now you must live as that person." I hung up, and for the first time during this ordeal I wept, not for money, not for property, not for status, but for the son I had raised who had never truly existed. 6 months later, my life had transformed. I had relocated to a luxurious apartment in Geneva near my inherited properties. Europe welcomed me with open arms. A place where no one knew my story, where I could walk the streets anonymously, and where I could start anew at 71. Samuel continued managing my legal affairs from the States, and for the first time in decades, I felt the peace of freedom. Adrian and Eliza had finally lost the house, unable to keep up with the $3,000 monthly rent. They had relocated to a small, modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a stark contrast to the life of manufactured luxury they had once flaunted. Adrian had found work as a technician at a local repair shop, earning a fraction of what he had previously taken for granted. Eliza was employed at a call center, the only place willing to hire her after her social media reputation had been ruined. The defamation lawsuit had concluded in my favor. The court ordered Eliza to pay substantial compensation and issue a public apology. It was brief and clearly reluctant, but it satisfied the legal requirement. I apologized to Helena for the false statements I made about her online. I acknowledge my claims were incorrect and caused damage to her reputation. I deeply regret my actions. I donated the entire compensation to organizations that supported single mothers and adoptive families. I didn't need the money, but it was a lesson. Spreading lies publicly carries real consequences. In the following months, messages poured in from women around the world. Mothers who had found courage to set boundaries with disrespectful children, mothers-in-law who stood up to difficult daughters-in-law, older women determined to reclaim their lives. One letter in particular stood out, from a woman named Maria in Colombia. "Mrs. Helena, your story saved me. For 15 years I endured the contempt of my son and daughter-in-law, believing it was my duty to tolerate everything for love. Your story taught me that love does not mean enduring abuse. Thank you for showing that mothers deserve respect too." Inspired by the response, I began writing a book about my experiences, not to seek revenge or profit, but to help others recognize and escape toxic relationships. The book would be titled "I Retired from Motherhood," dedicated to all women who had sacrificed their identities for others. reminding them that dignity and respect are non-negotiable. Adrian had tried to reach me repeatedly over those months, through Samuel, mutual acquaintances, and even traveling to Geneva in person, but I had kept my distance, firm in my decision. The last letter I received from him was particularly poignant. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I finally understand everything I did wrong. Eliza and I are divorced. She could never get past the public humiliation and blamed me for everything. Now I am alone and I see clearly what I lost. I didn't just lose a mother. I lost the only person who ever loved me unconditionally. I know it's too late, but I wanted you to know that I regret every cruel word, every moment of contempt and kicking you out of our wedding. I understand now that you were the best mother anyone could have, and I was too foolish to value you." I read his letter several times, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the recognition that Adrian had only truly understood too late, but relief that his acknowledgement validated the choices I had made. I had protected myself and upheld my worth, and finally, that truth had been recognized, even if only by him. He said, "I hadn't acted out of cruelty or vengeance. I had simply defended my dignity and set boundaries that protected me from abuse. In my new life in Geneva, I discovered a peace I hadn't known in decades. I spent my days reading, traveling, and meeting people who valued me for who I truly was. I finally enrolled in painting classes, something I had longed to do but never had time for while devoting myself entirely to Adrian. I also began volunteering with an organization supporting older women abandoned or mistreated by their families. My story offered them hope, a reminder that it was possible to rebuild a life after rejection and that self-respect was far more valuable than maintaining toxic relationships. One afternoon, while walking through a sunlit park, I reflected on the long journey from adopting a frightened 3-year-old boy to making the decision to retire from motherhood at 71. It had been painful at times but also deeply liberating. I did not regret adopting Adrian. I had given him love, guidance, education, and opportunities he would never have had otherwise. I did not regret the sacrifices I had made because they were acts of genuine care for a child who needed them. But I also did not regret stepping away when he became an adult who treated me with contempt. I had learned an essential truth. Unconditional love did not mean tolerating abuse. Loving someone did not require letting them destroy you in the name of that love. My phone buzzed with a message from Samuel. "Adrian reached out again," he wrote. "He says he's in therapy and finally understands the mistakes he made. He's asking if reconciliation is possible." I read the message and smiled with quiet sorrow. I replied, "Tell him I'm glad he's taking responsibility, but some doors once closed cannot be reopened. I wish him well in his new life." It was the truth. I wished him well, but no longer as his mother. That woman who had given her life to him no longer existed. In her place was Helena, a 71-year-old woman who had learned that self-respect and dignity are never too late to reclaim. As I walked along the streets of Geneva, I thought of the phrase that had become my mantra: "I don't regret adopting him. I only regret not realizing sooner that kindness should never come at the expense of my own well-being." My career as a mother had ended, but my life as a free, independent woman had only just begun. And that, I realized, was the truest form of revenge. To live well, to live in peace, to finally live for myself. He said,